The American Trucking Associations has been declaring a driver shortage for 20 years. In that time, the number of licensed commercial drivers has grown steadily. There are 1.5 million people employed in trucking in the United States right now, 15% more than a decade ago. The industry has a retention problem. 9 out of 10 drivers at a large carrier will leave within a year. To understand why nobody stays, you have to go back to 1980. In the 1950s and 1960s, truck driving was one of the best-paid working-class jobs in America. The Teamsters Union represented most long-haul drivers and negotiated hard on their behalf. A driver could expect predictable routes, regular home time, a pension, and wages that put a family solidly in the middle class without a college degree. Steve Viscelli, a sociologist at the University of Pennsylvania, who spent time driving trucks while researching his book on the industry, described pre-1980 trucking as exactly the kind of job that seems elusive now: steady, well-paid, and built to last. On July 1, 1980, President Carter signed the Motor Carrier Act. Before that law, the federal government controlled which companies could haul freight between states, which routes they could use, and how much they could charge. The law removed all of that. Anyone with a commercial license and a bank loan could now open a trucking company. Hundreds of thousands of small carriers entered the market. More competition meant lower prices for shipping freight. Lower prices for shipping meant lower wages for drivers. Real trucker pay fell more than 25% between 1978 and 1990. The Teamsters lost most of their bargaining power as carriers moved freight to smaller companies, willing to do it cheaper. By the time the decade ended, trucking had gone from one of America's most heavily unionized industries to one of its least. The pay structure that replaced union wages is the part most people outside the industry have never looked at closely. Most long-haul drivers are paid per mile. That sounds straightforward until you look at how a driver actually spends their day. Loading the truck before leaving takes an hour or two. A warehouse delivery can mean sitting in a parking lot for 4 hours waiting for a dock to open. Traffic, weather, mandatory rest stops required by law. All of it burns time that the odometer never measures. A driver can put in 70 hours in a week and get paid for maybe 40 of them, because the only hours that count are the ones where the wheels are moving. This is legal because of a loophole that has never been closed. The law that established the 40-hour workweek and required companies to pay extra for any hours beyond it, passed in 1938, included a specific carve-out for truck drivers. That exception made sense when most truck drivers did short local routes and were home every night. It has never been updated for long-haul trucking, where drivers can be away from home for weeks. The trucking industry has spent decades lobbying to keep that exception in place because closing it would mean paying drivers for the hours they currently work for free. The result, 60 years after that 1980 law, is a job that pays 60% less in real terms than it did before it passed, keeps drivers away from home for weeks at a time, doesn't pay them for a significant chunk of their working hours, and sees 9 out of 10 drivers at major companies quit within a year. The industry's response to that turnover has been to recruit constantly. Sign-on bonuses pull drivers from one company to another without changing the underlying conditions. Companies spend billions every year training new drivers to replace the ones who just left for a slightly better deal somewhere else or left trucking entirely. Calling it a driver shortage is useful for the industry because it points the finger at a labor market that supposedly can't produce enough workers, rather than at working conditions that make keeping workers nearly impossible. Trucking still moves about 70% of all freight in the United States. The supply chains that stock grocery stores in small towns, the same towns the previous generation of well-paid Teamster drivers lived in, depend on a workforce earning significantly less than their predecessors and turning over almost entirely each year. Large companies with big recruitment budgets can absorb that churn. Smaller regional carriers and independent drivers who own their own trucks bear the instability more directly. The driver shortage framing points to a supply chain crisis. The actual problem is a pay and conditions crisis that started in 1980 and has compounded every year since, because the people who could fix it have had no reason to.